Hey there, my name is Zach Bernard. I'm the founder of We Feature You, and in today's video, I wanted to cover how to land your first 10 podcast appearances in the next 90 days. So what we'll be covering, we'll be going over the system, the templates, the pitch templates, the booking strategies that actually deliver results, even if you're just starting from scratch and you've never been on podcast before. So one of the most important things that I want to cover is finding the right type of podcast to be on. There's a lot of misconception around where people will want to get on the biggest podcast and be like, oh, I need exposure. I need to get on the really big podcast. And at the end of the day, while that's true in some capacity, there's also the fact that you may be in a very niche industry where getting on a big podcast is not going to provide too much value, while getting on a very niche industry relevant podcast might get you even more value. That's very important to figure out here. But you want to start with what you know. Think about the podcasts that you already listen to, which ones actually align with your message and your audience. Try to make a list of around like 10 to 15 shows that you genuinely want to appear on, and then you can expand from there. Keep in mind, the biggest podcasts in the world, as mentioned, are not going to be the one that you want to aim in for directly, especially if you do not have any podcast experience or a major following. That does impact that as well. And you want to ask 4 main questions. The first one is going to be, what value can I provide to the show? Does my message align with the format of the show? What kind of guests do they feature? But also, more importantly, are they actually accepting guests on their podcast? Because believe it or not every podcast is looking for guests. So moving on to what makes a good podcast worth your time. So it's really important to understanding the difference between quality podcasts that won't deliver real impact is critical. And here's a few things that I want to touch on to make you really easily be able to understand if a show is worth your time. The first one is, do they have a consistent publishing schedule? Are they publishing weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, every few days or so? And are they actually sticking to that schedule, or do they have like really big gaps without any like explanation or anything like that? Do they have a strong rating and review? We try to aim for at least 4+ review with any podcast that we collaborate with or we pitch clients to. The main reason behind that is we want you to be associated with a credible podcast. And if you get placed on a podcast that has 1 star, 1 review, like people are probably not going to trust that too much, and that's going to impact your credibility. So it's very important. If you want to get on a podcast, don't try to get on any of them. You want to make sure that they have a reputation, they are credible, and people actually like the podcast. Because if it's a 1 star, probably means people don't actually appreciate the podcast, the guest, the host, and that will impact your credibility pretty heavily. Another thing, you want to look at past guests. What kind of guest has been on the podcast? And you want to make sure that these are people who have the expertise, who are experts in their space, and actually are bringing something meaningful to contribute to the conversation. Again, you want to be associated with people who are credible, not people that just started the company 2 months ago. Active promotion, another very big one that I want to address. So you want to make sure that if you look at a podcast, the episodes are being promoted on social media, they're being promoted on their newsletter, the website, the host social. The exposure of a podcast goes beyond the downloads and the listeners, and that's probably one of the things that I always like to address. You might look at a podcast like, okay, doesn't look like it's a very big podcast, but the host might have a very big following that might be sharing it on social, and that's where you're going to get most of the value from the podcast. So very important to double check that. And also make sure the podcast has a track record that's proven. So at least 25+ episodes, that's usually what we're looking for, because it shows that they have momentum and they've built an audience that continues to tune in here. But also make sure that any podcast you go after, professional, production quality is good, clean audio, thoughtful question, natural conversation, and obviously an enjoyable listening experience. So you don't want to go for a podcast that doesn't have a professional setup or anything like that, as again, it's going to impact the credibility that you have. And we don't obviously want that to happen. And the problem that most people face is they approach podcast guesting completely wrong. They're going to pitch like dozens of shows without doing any research, and they're going to say yes to any invitation that comes their way. And they're going to wonder why nothing happens after the interview goes live. There's no new client, no new partnership, no real impact. The podcasts that you choose matter just as much as what you say during the interview. The wrong shows waste your time, but the right ones will actually open doors for you. And to uncover the hidden gems in your niche, you need to have the right tools. So a couple essential tools that I recommend if you're starting out, you want to get into podcast guesting. There's really 4 main ones I would look at. First one is going to be Raphonic. Raphonic's one of the main platform that we use. It's obviously a bit more expensive, so if you're just starting out, probably wouldn't go for that one yet. Apple and Spotify, you can simply do keyword research for certain categories, keywords, and try to find potential podcasts that could be relevant. A bit more manual, might be a bit less relevant. There's also Podchaser, a bit similar to Raphonic as far as the database. And then another one that I would recommend, it's called Listen Notes. It's probably one of the most powerful and popular search platform when it comes to podcasting specifically. They have over 3 million podcasts, if I'm not totally mistaken, and you can find a lot of podcasts within your niche. It's a bit limited. There is a free version to it, but you're going to find like 10 podcasts a day or so. But if you have the paid version, I think it's maybe $12 a day, and then you can do pretty much like unlimited searches and everything. So that's worth the hassle. So if I was just starting out, Listen Notes is probably where I'd go. If you're trying to go very heavy, get on a lot of podcasts, get some really relevant podcasts worth your time, Raphonic is probably the other one I would go for. When it comes to building a target list strategically, there is 4 main components. The first one is you want to research and you want to listen. So whenever you want to go on a podcast, you want to try to listen to at least 1 or 2 potential episodes, take notes on the topics that are covered, the type of guests they have on the show, and you want to make sure that this show has genuine interest when you pitch them. So if you're trying to talk about sales, leadership development, you're not going to go after a music or arts podcast. There's no relevance, obviously. So make sure that there's alignment here. Again, assess the alignment. As I was saying, evaluate whether your expertise matches what their content is, like what they're talking about, what the recent guests are, who they are they in your space? Does your message actually complement the existing content that they have? So another very important one that actually should have been first, but you want to look to see if the podcasts even accept guests. Because trust me, we've seen that before where you want to go pitch your show, you're like, oh, this sounds like an amazing show. They've had guests in the past. And then you go on their website, you see that they're not currently accepting guest pitches, or they're only interviewing people who are past clients, partners, and everything like that. So very important. It's going to save you some time. And in some cases, some people will source their own guests. They're not going to be accepting guest pitches. So avoid those. You're going to waste your time. We don't want you to obviously do all the research, craft all the pitches, send the pitches, do the follow-ups, just find out that the show doesn't accept any guests. So I would put that number 1 now that I think about it. Categorizing your list is another very important one, as there's really multiple tiers. There's going to be the dream podcast, the strong fits, and the starter opportunities. So classify those, start with the starter opportunities first. And as you start getting on more podcasts, this is where you can move on to the stronger fits. And as you get on more stronger fits, you build a larger following, then you can go on to the dream podcast. But do not try to go into the dream podcast directly before starting at the bottom of the ladder here. So another 4 proven strategies to expand your podcast search is there's a few things that you can do. You can obviously use a lot of the tools that I mentioned, Listen Notes, Raphonic, etc. These strategies are going to be very helpful to find extremely relevant podcasts for you. One of the first thing that we always do with some clients, and I recommend that you do, is try to reverse engineer your competition. Look at the as seen on, or if they've been seen in the media, type of podcast they've been on, and if a peer has been featured, that audience is already primed for your topic. You can come from a different talking angle that they might have not addressed and bring something new to the conversation. We're really big on AI as well. What you can do is you can also use AI tools to analyze transcript to see pose, tone, and the question depth aligning with your brand. You can do like a quick vibe check, as I like to call it, before pitching. You can also work with a PR podcasting agency that has relationships with hundreds, thousands of podcast hosts. That's obviously going to save you a bit of time here, but also make sure to prioritize niche depth over mass reach. And what I mean by that is a podcast with 200 highly engaged listeners will often convert better than a show with 20,000 listeners. That's a broad business podcast. So aim for relevance over volume. Very important. So when it comes to pitching, there's really 5 main components that I like to have whenever we pitch anyone, the general structures. I promise a template outreach, I'll cover that in a second. But for the general structure, what you want to do is you want to have that personal connection. You want to reference a specific episode that you listen to and explain why. Try to mention a guest by name and what you've learned. Show that you've actually done your research and you're not just mass sending emails to everyone saying that, oh, I love your podcast. That does not resonate with podcast hosts. Trust me, I run my own podcast. I get a lot of pitches and you see them every single day. And the soft ask, don't try to jump straight into your pitch. You want to obviously ask them if they're currently accepting guests. This will help to open the conversation naturally and show respect for their time, because honestly, they might not be, and you want to be understanding that they're not accepting guesses here. And third, you want to go into your value proposition. So introduce yourself with a very concise bio, highlighting your expertise and credibility. This is very important to show why you should even be on the podcast in the first place, because you have to think in the host mind. They're getting thousands of pitches every single month. They have to vet who's credible, who's not credible. And directly, if you can talk about who you are, what you've done, and show really easily what you can do and we can talk about, that's going to make their job much easier to qualify you. So you want to focus on what makes you unique to add value to the audience, not just the the accomplishment. Try to make it short, straight to the point. It shouldn't all be about you. Obviously, it should be about the podcast, the value you can provide to the audience and what you think could be relevant. And what we also like to do as well is propose a few topics. So propose like 3 to 5 specific topics that will be specific to their show, and that could really fill some content gaps that would make them be interesting. So make the benefit driver for the audience and think how to lessons from, so it's really more value driven here. And one of the last things, which I feel a lot of people forget, promotional power. So anytime you go into pitching someone, you want to have a win-win situation. And the way that you can create this is by giving them something in return. Trust me, I speak to a lot of people. They're like, I have amazing insights. Like I get paid for this. I shouldn't be paying to get on podcasts. And at the end of the day, it's not your podcast. The host is giving you their platform. They're not asking you to pay or anything like that. And they're marketing you. Like you're getting free exposure, getting on a podcast, and you're not paying for it. So one of the things that you can do to provide a value add to the podcast, so it's if you have a big social media following, if you have a newsletter, or if you're open to sharing on your website or anything like that, mention that. The hosts that see that you're open to sharing, promoting the episode with all your audience, they'll be more open to that. We've A/B tested this so many times, and the people who have a major following versus someone that doesn't have a major following are always going to get more bookings from the outreach. So when it comes to the pitch, very similar to what I was talking about, but what we always like to do is like guest idea, guest pitch for podcast name, and then you can have a little cheesy line as far as your expertise. And then we always just like, hey name, recent listener, really enjoyed your episode with X about this topic. I'm actually a big fan of her work about this. Glad she could provide value to our audience. Thank you for having him on. And then quick question, again, I mentioned that earlier, are you currently taking on guests? I think I might have someone that would be interesting for your listeners. Insert your bio, 3 to 4 sentences highlighting your expertise and credibility, and then like couple things that I think could be relevant to your audience, seeing that, and then you want to correlate the reason why it would be relevant. Have 4 or 5 topics that are benefit focused on what you do and how it could benefit the audience. And then again, the promotional power. I built a platform of 10,000 followers, newsletters of 20,000 subscribers, which I'd be happy to use to help promote the episode. Looking forward to hearing from you. So general template, you can obviously play around with it, customize it based on who you are, what you do, but this will give you a good general structure to get some bookings in. So your 90-day roadmap to get those 10 interviews. Obviously, we want to have some accountability here. So that day 1 to 30, this is really where you want to have the research phase. You want to build a list of around 50 to 100 podcasts, listen to episodes, take notes, and organize by the tier and their alignment. Once you get to 31 to 60, that's where you want to have the outreach sprint. So try to send like 15 to 20 personalized pitches every single week. Follow up after like 2 to 3 days, and then 7 days afterwards if you get no response. And then you want to track everything in a spreadsheet to make sure that you're tracking your KPIs. You see what's working, what's not working. And then lastly, 61 to 90 is really where you have the interview and then you adjust. So complete your first interviews, promote them actively, and refine your pitch based on the feedback, and then aim for those 10 first bookings here. So remember that consistency will beat perfection every single time. So send those pitches, learn from the rejection, keep refining your approach, and every no will get you closer to yes. So you got this. Take action today. Landing your first 10 podcast appearances isn't just about luck or connections. It's also about the strategy, the persistence, providing genuine value to an audience. So start with that one pitch today. Your voice deserves to be heard, and the right podcast can open so many doors. So get on it. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Zach Bernard. Again, I'm the founder of We Feature You. We are a leading podcasting agency. If you want to skip this entire process of pitching yourself and getting booked on podcasts, we've built a relationship with over 600 podcast hosts that we leverage to get you booked on shows, and we help build you into an industry authority. So if you want to learn more about that, go into the description, head over to wefeature.com, and we'll speak to you then.